All right, I'm ready.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Hello, I'd like to call the South Lake Community Schools Board of Education special meeting on November 23rd, 2020 at 7 p.m. to order. Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
Ms. Sanchon.
Here.
Mr. Kennedy.
I'm here.
I'm here, Mr. Tao.
Yes, here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
And welcome, Ms. McDowell.
Here.
We have a quorum. I just want to let everybody know that Mr. Dashner was unable to attend tonight, which is why he's not here. And Ms. McDowell won the partial seat at the November election. And so she is taking over for Dan Schwegler, who will join us again when his 6-year term begins January 1st. So quick explanation as to the new makeup of the board. With that, we will move on to public comment. Just a reminder that we are going to hold everyone to a 3-minute comment, and because we'd like to get through all of these tonight. And also, please refrain from using staff names if possible. All right, with that, I will begin. First up is Ms. Gabrielli, and she states, I believe it is irresponsible to have our students return for 2 weeks before break. Have any of the board members been in K-5 building at that time of year, let alone during a pandemic? Elementary students thrive off of routine and structure, and this plan is the complete opposite. Not to mention the current state of our community with the rising COVID cases. I implore you to help our little ones by providing consistency and have them home until January for their education and their safety. Ms. Wood, Jessica Wood, states, if elementary goes fully virtual, there needs to be more focus on writing with pencil and paper and synchronous specials, social studies, and science. These kids are losing their ability to print and write by having to type all the time, and asynchronous specials with just office hours accomplishes nothing. They are not learning from those sessions. The district needs to make sure these critical skills, especially writing with paper and pencil, have more focus. Ms. Jessica Garnick states, I'd like to understand if the district or school board has a plan for K-5 students who miss an extraordinary amount of school and instruction due to having cold flu symptoms that require a 14-day quarantine or negative COVID tests that take 2 to 3 days to receive results from. I recently went through this with my child. Her teacher was able to upload assignments she missed the week she was out, but there were no lessons to show how the work was to be done, requiring at-home parental instruction. Matthew Berry states, number 1, thank you for taking the time to consider what is best for the students, parents, and educators involved. Number 2, please make the right decision to keep my children in person where they are developing incredibly because they are getting what they need. They do not get what they need at home in front of a screen and competing for my help and attention over their younger siblings. In person is the appropriate choice for elementary students. It can't be called hybrid if it's not. Stop jerking us around. Lori Lewis states, I don't believe that elementary schools should be in person December 7th through the 18th. The lack of concern and regard for the health and safety of staff and kids is evident when you voted against the superintendent's recommendation and said that there was no harm to send elementary kids to school. The amount of tracking we do of sick kids with symptoms and those who have had close contact is a full-time job. Please show your concern and care for us as you do secondary schools and reconsider your decision. Lisa Silverson states, I am writing to express my thoughts regarding the revised plan for in-person learning at the elementary schools. I am the parent of a 2nd grade student enrolled in Southline Community Schools. I would encourage you to keep the students in person the 2 weeks prior to winter break. I, along with many parents, have spoken to are greatly concerned about the educational, social, and emotional stresses involved with remote learning. There is a significant improvement in all these areas when the students are attend in person. Amy Alexander states, I'm in support of the superintendent's recommendations for elementary to go remote. As a parent of an elementary student and middle school student, I know the best place is in school. However, structure and routine are best. The data shows the numbers are higher than in March. I know your job isn't easy, but please have faith in the staff and administration. The community needs our kids to have structure and routine. Our kids need their teachers healthy and available to answer questions. Mr. Jason Scott was planning on calling in. Mr. Scott, are you on the line? Okay, he does have a comment here, so I'll read that. And if Mr. Scott, if you do join us, just let me know that you're here. He states, "You've already made your decision. It was a reasonable compromise. Don't go back on your decision. Strengthen your resolve. Don't continue to flip-flop with the children and families in South Lyon. No one is guaranteed tomorrow. What kind of message are you sending as adults that our schools aren't safe places for our kids if you change your mind? Kids are watching." Ms. Kelly Ray states, "The Board of Education approved a revised model of instruction for PK to 12 at the Board of Education meeting on November 16th, 2020. Since November 16th, there has been no additional new scientific evidence that indicates that elementary students should not be in person. Continually changing the schedule and continually re-voting on an issue because the superintendent did not like the outcome is not the best way to serve our students." Next up is Katie Bell, and she was planning on calling in. Ms. Bell, are you on the line?
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
I
go
am.
ahead.
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yep,
great.
yep, go
Okay.
ahead.
So first, thank you to Dr. Archibald, the Southline administrative team, the board members in the community for allowing me to share my thoughts with you tonight. I am a proud SLEA staff member in the special ed department. I've worked as a speech language pathologist with babies to high school age students, and now I'm at Pearson Elementary in 15 years within this district. Overall, I have 20 years of experience teaching within public schools and have supported hundreds of students with a wide range of disabilities during my tenure. I am also a parent to a middle school and high school age student and married to an administrator from a neighboring district. I appreciate and respect the proposal to revise the mode of instruction plan for elementary students to a virtual learning environment. I felt very disheartened with the proposal that the board presented last week, as it appeared to be developed with no regards to objective data. In a district that prides themselves on data-driven instruction, I feel these decisions need to be made with data and science rather than subjective opinions. I truly love my job and my students. Seeing in person the excitement, growth, and self-esteem bloom is why I became a school-based speech pathologist. I value in-person instruction and thrive off of those interpersonal relationships that you just don't have the opportunity to do spontaneously through structured virtual instruction times. There is no doubt that supporting student engagement in the classroom through quick strategies, reading nonverbal cues, and allowing for flexibility is beneficial for all students. But with objective comparison, I have also seen growth and progress towards goals in both types of instruction. In fact, in analyzing my current progress reports, 89% of my students had made growth in their IEP goals with both in-person and virtual instruction. I personally have already been quarantined for 14 days once this year due to direct exposure to a student. A virtual schedule for all students is based on data and science, and it keeps us teachers, the community, and our students safe. According to the CDC, the average incubation time period is 11.5 days, and the symptoms of COVID-19 are not reflective of just another virus. With the numbers pushing past 40,000 in Oakland County alone at an alarming rate, and symptoms of my own friends and family ranging from asymptomatic fevers for 12 straight days and unfortunately death, right now is the time to err on the side of caution. Currently, I'm working with 54 students at Pearson Elementary, reflective of 12% of our student population. And the reality is, for many of us ancillary staff, our job is really not meeting the safety guidelines. Every day, I am continuously reminding my students to pull up their masks, maintain social distancing, and not touch each other's materials. And I am exposed to students within 84% of the classrooms in my building. Close proximity is required for my job. They need cueing strategies and other physical supports to be successful. My students, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here really quick. My students require direct visual cues to learn, and my clear masks fog up and gap at the sides, while virtually I have a built-in mirror with the camera and face-to-face instruction. I'm certainly trying my best to clean between all groups and maintain class cohorts, but once again, it's really challenging. And honestly, in the spirit of being fully transparent, I'm exhausted and anxious about my safety. In supporting the continuity of learning and the need for consistency, many of our most at-risk learners and families need on average 1 to 2 weeks to acclimate themselves to any type of instruction, virtual or in person.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. All right. Next up is Ms. Allie Hinkst. And she states, good evening. I have 2 young children at Pearson. I love having them in person where they thrive, but not at the cost of their safety. Furthermore, these young kids need structure. The flip-flopping plan of the in-person then remote is much harder on their ability to learn than switching to remote for a few weeks, where they can adapt to a new schedule. The pandemic is surging again. This change is difficult but necessary. Please follow the lead of so many other districts and go remote. Thank you. Mr. Andrew Schmoller. My son is a 3rd grader at Hardy Elementary. He is in general education and is attached to the self-contained EI room, where he receives special education services. My son thrives on the structure and special ed services provided by the awesome staff at Hardy. Please allow the self-contained rooms at Hardy to remain open for face-to-face learning. This allows the most at-risk learners to continue to receive much-needed support in an extremely small, contained environment where they can continue to thrive. Next up is Lynn Millward, and she's planning on calling in as well. Ms. Millward, are you on the line?
Hello.
Hello, yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, quick reminder, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I am going to talk clearly but fast. So I am a 1st grade teacher at Sayre Elementary with 21 years experience teaching 1st grade. I wanted to thank the board and district administration for holding this emergency meeting tonight. The past 8 months have brought unprecedented changes to what our idea of schooling looks like. While I truly believe that in-person instruction for young children is our best option, I am equally convinced that this is not a safe or viable option for elementary students and staff at this time. Therefore, I strongly urge the board to reconsider the decision reached last week and make the move to remote instruction for elementary classrooms. I want to make sure the public has a clear picture of the amount of instructional time that is currently being allotted to following necessary safety protocols for in-person instruction to continue. In a given day, in our classroom, we spend 30 minutes hand washing and having snack, 10 minutes cleaning tables and desks, transitioning between indoor and outdoor settings for recess with social distancing at lockers, 15 minutes a day. This will undoubtedly increase with the addition of snow clothes and snow gear. We are currently spending between 40 and 50 minutes with our dismissal procedures. Students are leaving at different points during this time, so instruction has to be changed because inevitably someone will be missing something important. Well, these are not formal metrics. They are, if anything, conservative. We are looking at between 1.5 to 2 hours of instruction time over the course of any given school day that is taken up with activities that are not directly related to instruction. While remote learning certainly has its own limitations, I am sure of 2 things. I am able to teach more content in remote instruction, and I am able to give students individual and small group attention that I simply cannot manage. I am a 21-year veteran teacher, and I cannot manage it in a classroom setting in this age of COVID-19. Furthermore, when thinking about the emotional wellness of my students, I feel that we have created a caring classroom community. Having had the opportunity to establish this community at the beginning of the year, then being able to support it with in-person instruction has made it very palpable. My students and I are stuck together even when we are not together physically. We know each other's likes and dislikes, we have our jokes, and we share our stories. I could tell you about who has a new puppy and who has lost a tooth, and I could tell you what that child did to get that tooth out. We are connected, and we don't need to be in person to have these.
Sorry. All right. Thank you. Next up is Miss Christina Santana, and she states, please keep our district safe. In-person learning is best, but it's also widely accepted that it's difficult for students and staff to learn and teach if they're sick, mourning, or deceased. The board acknowledged our community's risk and that asymptomatic yet contagious students would return after the holidays. How is it then acceptable to find ways to expose students and staff to this risk? Please consider and vote to continue remote instruction for K-5 through January 8th. Shelby Lutke says, as a single parent WFH, I agonize over my decision about face-to-face or VLP. Had I known how successful and engaged my kids would be during the first few weeks of the year, I would have opted for VLP. I had faith that the school board would make decisions based on data and science, not emotions or politics. I hope that you will consider these in our community who are most at risk. I believe we should pause and return to in-person learning when community transmission levels are reduced to safe levels. Leah Young states, one of my kids sees several special ed teachers weekly. She needs in-person learning and limited virtual lessons to thrive. That's why we chose hybrid learning. We canceled all holiday plans to be sure our kids are healthy enough to attend school. The CDC says the school is one of the safest places for kids. It's where they learn best. Kent Lake teachers' leadership qualities like make a plan and stick to it. It's time for our school board to lead by example. You've made a plan, please stick to it. Next up is Stephanie Andrews, and she would like to call in. Ms. Andrews, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Quick reminder, you only have 3 minutes and they will cut you off.
No, it's okay. I don't have 3 minutes worth.
Okay, perfect. Go right ahead.
All I wanted to say is throughout this unprecedented time, you have had the very difficult task of making decisions that affected a multitude of families in this community. I am sure today will be just as difficult, but it is my hope that you will seriously consider voting against the Central Office Administration's recommendations. We all agree that in-person learning is the best model for our youngest learners and that our elementary children need routine. However, is it more important for them to have the same routine for the next month over the ability to thrive in the classroom with a slight routine disruption? My son is a first grader at Pearson Elementary, and his class was one of the many in the district that needed to quarantine due to a positive COVID case. The decline of his emotional well-being during that time was evident by the outbursts of crying and frustration he experienced. When the time came for him to go back to school in person, he was overjoyed and went back to his in-person routine without missing a beat. 2020 has been anything but routine and has forced us all to be flexible. Our children were the ones who accepted change far more easily than we adults have. The cases in COVID in our state, the Michigan Health and Human Service Department placed restrictions on all Michigan residents. Those restrictions did not include moving our youngest learners to a remote model for the remainder of the year. A week ago, you all made a decision that you felt was in the best interest of our community, and it is my hope that you will all stand by that decision and allow for our children to continue to be in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Sarah Hamilton, and she states, I found it ridiculous that Superintendent Archibald has yet to talk to any of the successful school districts like Howell that has delivered 14 weeks of in-person instruction for all students. It is embarrassing the lack of consistency Southline provides for its families. For the school board to go against the recommendation last week to enact a confusing and last-minute plan only to retract it this week shows the utter lack of unity and clear thinking needed to run a school district. And Jennifer Kraft states, my son is in 3rd grade, and during remote school, we quickly discovered that his academic challenges were highlighted significantly. And with 2 full-time career parents, it was beyond challenging to keep up with all the educational support he needed. Since being back in person, he has been thriving academically as if our prayers have been answered. I pray you see this immeasurable value in keeping the younger kids in person, far outweighing any health risks.
All right.
Mr.
Ready?
Abate? Yep.
All right. Excuse me. Next up is Kim Bezos. I am a staff member and parent of 3 elementary and middle school levels. The VLP program is the best decision I made for my boys this year. Their teachers are fully engaged and able to provide more one-on-one learning than they ever did in the classroom. From behavioral problems to student interruptions, teachers are unable to fully commit to small groups or instruction in class. In VLP, teachers can utilize breakout rooms and complete a learning lesson with minimal disruptions. Allison Ritter is next. The disparity of modes of education district to district is creating educational inequality. If we deny young learners face-to-face education, South Lyon kids will fall behind as Novi, Northville, Brighton, etc. stay open. Some kindergartners will be face-to-face and learn to read and write this year. A whole lot won't. Many first graders who lost a third of their kindergarten year and now a bulk of first grade are still at mid-kindergarten level. The range of competencies is widening. Give our kids an edge, keep them first. Jill Manukin is next. Any parents who signed up for in-person want whatever they can get, so the back and forth is okay with us. We are looking at what Brighton, Novi, Howell are we looking at what Brighton, Novi, Howell are doing? Can we just be off the month of December and add 2 weeks into summer? It's one thing to find coverage for childcare. It's another to find coverage for childcare with people who can actually assist the little ones with virtual learning. Teachers should be considered essential within our community and stay open. Let parents make the choice. Marissa Ardner is next. In July, I withdrew my oldest students from SLCS to homeschool as I imagined there being disruptions in learning and find computer learning for hours to be unhealthy and ineffective for young children. I was thrilled when my 4-year-old twins could go to ECC for school, speech, and social development. I'm very concerned that virtual learning for my 4-year-olds know they won't learn and the lapse in their necessary speech therapy. They're thriving in person. Thank you for the energy you put into these decisions. Aaron Cottingim is next. We decided to go with VLP to try to create a routine that was consistent and safe for our family. So we've been so impressed by how this year has gone in VLP. We don't typically read teachers' names, but this is a nice compliment, so I'm going to go ahead and read that. Our teachers, Miss Duet and Miss DeWitt and Miss Jaskolski, are just wonderful. Our oldest was struggling, and she messaged DeWitt during the group, who took her into a private session after the group to really go over the topic. She said she would not have raised her hand in a normal class situation. This is one of the many positives. Krista Woodman is next. When we signed up for in-person learning, we thought our school board and administration would know when it was no longer safe to be in the classroom and when to make the tough call to move back to remote. It is no longer safe. We want in-person learning, but only when it is safe for all. Coming back to school those 2 weeks in December puts every student and staff member at risk, as well as the family members they live with. Please vote to move to remote until January as recommended. Thank you. Alice Gessick is next. This back and forth on the plan is only exacerbating the stress and anxiety felt by all children, parents and staff, adults and kids too. Understand that face-to-face came with the possibility of quarantines here and there. Changing the plans again will take away, in many cases, the only outlet that mildly resembles the childhood our kids knew before this pandemic, in-person school. Stay calm and carry on. Stick to the plan. Keep kids in school, quarantine as you must, and wear your mask. David Ritter is next. Education and medical experts say young kids need the classroom. It's the safest place physically, mentally, and emotionally. Science proves kids are not mass spreaders. If all are wearing masks, washing hands, sanitizing, and cohorting, teachers are quite safe. How can McDonald's staff be essential but not teachers? What does that say about the importance of education? Show kids receiving a quality education is at least as essential as getting a Big Mac. It's working as expected. Stay the course. Jeff Riggin is the next, and this is indicated to be a call-in. Mr. Riggin, are you there? Mr. Riggin? There is a comment that I will read, and we can circle back if he comes on. I don't understand the logic of now switching to fully remote through mid-January when less than a week ago there was already a change and a compromise made to allow for remote during the first weeks of December and January. Now the remaining 2 weeks of in-person instruction in December are being taken away. Why? Everyone knows that little kids need to be in school in person. The rug is being pulled from under us a week after concessions were made. What changed in 3 business days? Amanda Matthews is next. It is frustrating to hear that you may revise the elementary plan again. I was so happy to hear at the last meeting that someone finally was recognizing that virtual learning is not in the best interest of K-5 learners. Consistency is in the classroom. Their virtual learning is far from consistent. They finally settled in and are actually learning as opposed to the online instruction. Don't change it on them for 2 weeks. Let them finish till Christmas and then reassess. Carrie Monstrola is next. Dear SLCS board members, as an elementary school teacher, I believe that consistency is key for student success. I do not feel the current plan is the best for student success and hope that you consider how important consistency for young children is. I also would like you to think about to think about more than just the number of positive cases. With 3 elementary schools having to go completely remote, I think it is time to take the recommendation from administration to keep us remote through January. Anthony Santana is next. Disappointed in the haphazard manner in which these decisions are being made. At the last board meeting, members were laughing as options were being discussed. The plan seemed to be put together ad hoc during the meeting without prior consideration. Direction has changed on a day-to-day basis, but learning paths are closed prematurely and have not been made available again. Please allow us to choose the best mode of learning for a child given current information. One size does not fit all. Linda Gorman is next. Keep elementary schools in face-to-face instruction. If staffing is the issue, what will be different in January? Will we be remote after break? COVID will still be around even if there is a vaccine. What proactive steps is the administration taking to combat staffing issues? Using an outside staffing agency. I feel this year is basically a loss if we don't remain face-to-face. What a huge disservice to all students, especially to our youngest learners. Diane Zach is next. I've sent in an email to each of you COVID transparency reports. I suggest the school communities distinguish if the positive COVID cases are staff or students. Adults have a wider range of freedom and mobility, traveling further and more often than young students who need an adult for transportation. It's understood secondary students intermingle more often. Many districts within a 20-mile radius of SLCS list whether the case is staff or student. Some of those districts are listed in the email. Mackenzie Purcell is the next comment. I watched last Monday's meeting over 2 hours to see and understand the discussion for our children. Like most of you, I also felt like there is no right answer. All of you in the community brought up so many great questions and concerns. I feel you made the compromise for the families who are choosing to do in-person learning. Please consider voting for the plan you already have in place. Lisa Becker is next. Now is not the time to come up with a compromise. Now is the time to keep our staff and children safe by staying remote. You already acknowledged our community's risk. Schools have been shut down. Do you really think these numbers are going to get better after families congregate together? Our teachers don't deserve to have their lives put at any more risk than they are now. It is time to get back to them and show them we value their lives just as much as our kids. Alexis Crossman is next. I would like to know how SLCS plans to account for missed instructional time for hybrid students when compared to VLP students. Last week, there was no school on 11/18 in preparation for remote learning. Virtual students didn't miss a day. When we choose the hybrid model, we did so because we felt that it would be more impactful and productive than virtual. We did not select it with any intention or implication that we'd be missing more instructional time compared to VLP. Michael Rizzi is next. What has changed in the last week that requires a change in elementary school? How many positive cases are there for little kids? What are you trying to achieve by making the young ones go virtual? Joseph Kaimik is next. What is best for elementary children is face-to-face. Anyone who felt otherwise is doing full virtual already. My 4th grader asked me why the board doesn't ask the students what they want since they are the ones expected to learn. He's struggling with the virtual learning through no fault of his own. Seeing him mad at himself and struggling angers me to my core. I'm disgusted with the cowardice being shown at the continued expense of our children. School is and always has been essential. Elizabeth Douglas is next. Hi, board. As parents of 2 elementary children and a preschooler, we want to reiterate our position to leave JK through 5 in-person instruction. Please consider the emotional and social impacts of eliminating this option in your decision process. The governor's position is to leave them in-person instruction. The numbers will never be perfect or safe for anyone. There is virtual options for those who are not comfortable. Those of us that send our kids in accept the risk and liability of this choice. You're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. Next up is Jen Gunderson. I'll keep this short. You read the data and the facts like the rest of us. I am a principal of an early childhood facility who has remained open since June. We too deal with struggles related to the virus daily: closures, staffing, contact tracing, etc. My question is this: what will be different in January? What will you do to ensure our kids at all levels can be in person? What will be different next year? We are failing our kids and have to find a way to make in-person work for them. Matt Sebastian states, no major changes have been made since the recommendation 1 week ago. After your decision, the CDC advocated for in-person learning, then retracted their recommendation. They did not argue against in-person learning. Rather, they acknowledged a fact we all already knew. Leaving the house increases the chances of contracting the virus, but wearing a mask mitigates the risk. As Mr. Archibald reminded you last week, he works for you, not the other way around. Stick with the plan. Miss Angela Dupree states, I applaud your efforts last week at listening to the needs of our district and arriving at a compromise. Please stay the course. Elementary students need in-person learning as much as possible. As we sit and debate plans for schooling, time keeps moving and kids keep falling further behind. The missed curriculum from the spring has gone and children have lost that piece of their education. Remote learning leads to further deficits that I fear will never be made up. You have to do better. Dane Jackson states, I have been a vocal critic of the back to school plan since September, October. After the initial changes were made, I immediately put my child in VLP. Recent developments over the last 2 weeks support that feeling. I'm submitting a comment tonight in support of VLP. It seems our voices are few and far between. We couldn't be happier. The teachers involved with VLP are working their butts off and don't get the credit they deserve. My child is excelling with the support of her teachers and peers. Patrick Lidstrom states, I feel that in-person learning is a much better education. I also know that it helps my son feel normal during these already trying times. I think our school, staff, and students have done a great job in making this a safe and far better learning experience than if my son was at home. I hope and pray that there are enough of you on the school board to do the right thing and let our kids continue to attend in-person learning, because there are a lot of other things kids learn in school. Stephen McLean states, a legitimate compromise was reached at last week's meeting. Now it would appear as if the superintendent has had the opportunity to collude with board members to revisit his agenda. Do what you want tonight, but in the future, please save us from any sanctimonious propaganda advertising South Lyon is a kids first district, when it's clearly anything but. Perhaps a FOIA inquiry from Sue Brumley of Hometown Life would shed more light on the activities of the past 7 days. Matt Blazak wanted to call in. Are you on the line, Mr. Blazak?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep,
Can you hear me?
yep, go ahead. Just a quick reminder, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I won't be that long. So I just wanted to reiterate that, it's kind of disheartening that the school board and the superintendent can't see eye to eye here. You got the superintendent who seems like he's trying to override what you guys are coming up with. Just this Thursday, the CDC director at a task force briefing held at the White House clearly stated that the safest place for our children is in the schools. He says the infections that we have identified in schools that we've evaluated were not acquired in schools. They were actually acquired in the community and in households. Explaining that sites, he believes Americans getting comfortable in removing protective face masks are part of it. He said the truth is for kids K through 12, one of the safest places they can be from our perspective is to remain in school, and is really important that they, following the data, make sure that we don't make emotional decisions about what to close and what not to close. He is the CDC director, just reiterating that. He's quoted stating here, I am here to clearly state that data strongly supports that K-12 schools as well as institutions of higher learning should remain open. And I think I agree with that. We got teachers on the other end here who are calling in who with their pre-written union, backed letters. You got doctors and nurses every day going around this stuff working. They show up to work day in, day out. They're exposed to it day in, day out, and they continue to work day in, day out. I feel, these teachers are afraid to be around this or catch this, that they need to remove themselves from it. But our kids mentally need this in person. Our kids are falling behind in the school district compared to neighboring kids. It's clear my kids are falling behind in the same grades. They're suffering from depression. And I just think, you guys need to stick to a plan and keep a consistency here. The kids need to be in school. That's what they need, to be around kids, social interactions. And, it's going to heal in time, but going back and forth is not right for these kids. Clearly follow the CDC directives. The kids need to be in school.
Thank you. Next up, Carrie Stone states, why is it that we are not able to put practices in place that would allow our schools to stay open like other schools have done? Carrie Stone again states, why was it that rumor was shut down the night before kids are supposed to be in school with no appropriate notice for parents to include even a skyward text or phone call? Catherine Wells states, are parents going to be able to offer comment once the superintendent has reviewed the rationale for the change in strategy? The process seems a bit backwards at this point. Patrick McGuire states, could the board please explain what data or science they are using to make these decisions? We all want kids in school, but the science shows it simply is not safe right now. Is the board willing to use a decision-making model based on something other than appeasing the loudest parents? Jimmy Miller states, out of the pantheon of second grade students in our district, how many are actually going to be able to pass the minimum state and federal guidelines for education? My kid has trouble spelling pineapple on his quiz. My kid had trouble spelling pineapple on his quiz just a week ago. Ashley Harvey states, we all know how important in-person instruction is for our kids. Families should be responsible during the holidays, and schools are doing a good job at mitigating the spread by doing the daily screening questions. These kids should be in school. Not every child has a stay-at-home mom that can help them during the day, and for some kids, school is their safe place. Craig Skulski states, what is the criteria to return to face-to-face learning for elementary and middle school students? I'm concerned there has been no discussion on what criteria to return in January. Has the board considered pushing out the academic calendar into the summer with the availability of a vaccine coming in the first half of 2021? Virtual learning is not education at the lower elementary grades. I am concerned my kid will be behind in their learning and development if we continue with virtual. Jill Tannison states, I urge you to please take these children's mental health into consideration. My 8-year-old, yes, only 8, was actually severely depressed when school remained remote. I should not be seeking therapy for a child that young who is and always has been otherwise a happy child due to this. These children especially need socialization. Kim Craighead states, thank you for all you do for our community. I work in a high-risk exposure job. I urge you to visit the virtual learning platforms. Not only is online learning completely ineffective, but it's confusing and frustrating to the kids. It's also frustrating when the computers the district used don't work. Self-contained classrooms at a minimum should be open to general education, special education students as well. I invite you to my home to watch how ineffective remote learning is. Matt Blazak. Are you there, Mr. Blazak? Oh, yes, go right ahead.
I already spoke, but I was going to add one more thing. I wanted to add too that, we as the tax-paying citizens, we're here, we're paying the teachers to teach our children, and us parents are teaching our children now, trying to work jobs to put food on the table and stuff like that. So we ask, the school board, get these kids back in school. They learn best there. And, we're paying these teachers to do this. It's very ineffective. The internets go down. It's just horrible for these kids to learn.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Gina Glazik, and she states, as a special needs parent, I'm heartbroken that my son will likely have in-person learning taken away again. If you switch back to remote, can you please address special education? Are there other options we can pursue for these students? For example, can staff make home visits? Let's think outside the box. Jill Marie states, I am in disbelief that this is even a discussion. This is a global pandemic. Teachers are not daycare providers. Elementary school teachers are not disposable. We deserve equity too. It is not fair that high school teachers can have their health and safety protected, and we do not. This is a global pandemic, not a typical year. We are not other districts. Please open your eyes to see that you should be protecting your employees. You have the power to not put our health at risk.
Want me to pick it up, Carrie?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yep, you're up.
Joanne Whitney is our next comment. My daughter is a 3rd grader at Brummer. Remote instruction does not work for her. It is impossible for the staff to meet her legally mandated 504 accommodations, and her academic progress was significantly impacted. We've reviewed her plan twice already this year to attempt to sort things out. Since being in the classroom, even with the extended interruptions, she is doing much better. Simply put, virtual does not work. Please keep these kids face-to-face. Brad Halberstadt is next. This virtual learning is a joke. My child is not learning without incredible help from either my wife or I. Assignments are given, but the actual teaching is shared way too much by unpaid parents. We have jobs and they are suffering. Our students don't learn unless we help greatly. Rebecca Main. All I want to say is thank you. Thank you to all the SLCS board, teachers, and staff. We are a VOP family, and we are beyond grateful and happy with how VOP is going. The teacher girls are thriving, and we are all safe. Thank you to every single person in the district that has made this possible for my girls. Steve B is next. Think about what is best for students and staff right now, not about the parents. No parent wants to have to do online learning with their children every day right now. However, the alternative is dangerous and potentially deadly. Staff and students are the priority. Whitmer even said each district needs to determine what is best for the district. Within 3 weeks, multiple classrooms and schools were shut down. It is not safe for our district, regardless of other districts. Amanda Levenberg is next. Please consider keeping self-contained special needs classrooms in person. My daughter won't sit on a computer to learn. This time is already extremely difficult for us. Thank you. Lonnie Pryor is next. Hello, I'm writing in to be a voice for the self-contained classrooms at Hardy. Imagine being a special needs child and not having your words, aka nonverbal. Then imagine being told that you have to do all your learning through a Google Meet. That's my daughter. My daughter's IEP that is legally afforded to her cannot be met in a virtual environment. I ask that you please consider allowing the self-contained classrooms to continue in person. Thank you. Kristen Vaughn is next. Please keep our children in school. My kindergartner loves going to in-person school. He's so happy playing with other children and learning in the classroom. Virtual days are full of tears and hating school. Please consider the children. Michelle Frost is next. I agree teachers are essential workers. However, we do not have the level of PPE and disinfecting standards that hospitals have. Teachers are doing the best in both in-person and remote. Simply put, we are at risk. And Mike Davis. I think it is important to remember that the customers you serve are the parents. The product you provide is the children's education. The school board needs to ask, is your first responsibility to the public or to the teachers? Each of you are private citizens and know that once a decision like fully virtual for a month is made, it can be next to impossible to undo. Think 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Also, reading comments from VOP parents is nothing more than propaganda for this hearing. And that concludes our comments for the moment.
All right, thank you. All right, next up is item number 4, the review of the elementary mode of instruction. Mr. Archibald, will you begin?
I will. Thank you, President Hanshaw, excuse me, and members of the board. Appreciate you being here this evening. We'll start with a presentation with some background. Again, since the November 16th board meeting just this past Monday, I've received numerous emails and phone calls from community members, as I'm sure you have as well. Some people have expressed support for the decision made last week to amend the administration's recommendation regarding in-person virtual instruction, while others have expressed disappointment. While the points we brought forward last week are still valid, we are providing you with additional information and rationale regarding the recommendation to move to remote learning for our elementary students. The additional information centers around 3 main points: the incubation period following Thanksgiving, the importance of consistency and routines for elementary age learners, and the system impact on our instructional program. Next slide, please. Thank you, Chester. Quick overview of tonight's presentation. We'll review very quickly the modes of instruction, both current and the proposed change from this evening. We'll provide a brief update of county data that was shared last week, information regarding the incubation period, and specific with regard to the Thanksgiving holiday, importance of consistency and routines at the elementary level, and again, our system impact and continuity of instruction. This slide here is simply reflects what was approved last week at the middle school and high school levels. Just put it in here as a reference, and we're not recommending any changes to this. Next slide, please. What you see here is the current mode of instruction that was approved on the 16th. For your reference, good, thank you, Chester. Here, the recommendation to revive the elementary. On the left-hand side, again, just to do a side-by-side view for you. The left-hand side is what was approved last week. And the right-hand side, you'll see the highlighted change. It is simply 8 days of in-person instruction. And we will cover in good detail throughout the presentation the significance and why moving the December 7th through the 18th to remote learning is what we believe is in the best interest of our learners at this point. Again, last week, this information was updated by the Oakland County Health Department, received on Thursday, the 19th. We remain at level E, which is the highest risk level. And as we pointed out last week, it is a recommendation at this point that districts consider remote instruction for an entire district. Again, updated this slide from last week showing the age bands of our school age children with the addition of the reporting period, November 4th through the 17th, which is on the far right. Again, you'll see that we are on a continued trend in an upward direction with respect to our positive cases in all age groups across our county. This slide again is specific to South Lyon. This is the community positive cases in the blue dotted line and the cases per 10,000 within the South Lyon Community Schools geographic boundaries. Again, the far right is the reporting period 11/5 through 11/18, the updated information from last week, which continues to show a trend in an upward direction with respect to both of these impacting our community with respect to our community spread of the virus. Next slide, please. I'll turn it over to Sue Toth regarding incubation.
Thank you. This evening, I'll be talking briefly about the COVID-19 virus and the information relative to our district. The incubation period for COVID-19 extends through the 14 days after exposure. This is why the Oakland County Health Department requires persons who have been exposed to the virus to remain in quarantine through 14 days. In South Lyon Community Schools specifically, we have seen multiple cases of symptoms appearing on days 13 and 14 after being exposed to someone who has tested positive with the virus. Next slide, please. While the incubation period for the virus can be as long as 14 days, people who are infected with the virus may become infectious several days before they start to experience symptoms. This slide is a visual of how an individual feels as compared to how contagious they are to others. The pictures at the top show a person visiting with others prior to testing positive with the virus. The green line represents how sick the person in the example is feeling. The red line identifies how contagious the person is to others. On Monday and Tuesday, the person is feeling well, and the onset of symptoms begins on Wednesday. In this example, the person tests positive for the virus on Thursday. Those who had close contact with the ill person 2 days prior to the onset of the symptoms will be required to quarantine. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, may I ask a question about that slide?
Yes.
The previous slide, so that kind of shows with somebody testing that would assume that they get a test and they get results right away. Is that what the drawing is meant to show? Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Next slide, please. Thank you. So let's apply this example to our adopted December 2020 elementary mode of instruction calendar. This is the current elementary calendar. Let's assume that a student had close contact with a person who exposed them to the COVID virus on Thanksgiving Day. With our current calendar, the student could be in attendance for 3 days of in-person instruction and while still being within the incubation period before showing symptoms. The red line represents the incubation period from Thanksgiving Day only. This example does not take into account a close contact with a person who didn't know that they were positive with the COVID virus on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday following Thanksgiving. Remember that after a close contact Persons are quarantined through the 14th day. In other words, 14 days plus one more day. The primary concern about ensuring that we are remote for the potential incubation period after the Thanksgiving holiday is the current rate of community transmission. Next slide, please. This graph shows our district total number of students who have been identified as being close contacts with someone with the virus or having the virus themselves in the month of November. The close contacts in this example are students who are exposed either at school or within their home community. These students have been required to remain at home in quarantine or in isolation. Our local data reported from our elementary buildings demonstrates the need for the 2-week incubation period following a holiday. Our local elementary level data shows increases in students quarantined or who tested positive with COVID in the 2 weeks following Halloween. The contact tracing done with the assistance of the Oakland County Health Department during the month of November revealed that the positive cases 2 weeks beyond Halloween were connected to known social gatherings. And we know that there are typically more gatherings for Thanksgiving. Next slide, please. This graph shows our district total number of elementary teachers who have been identified as being a close contact with someone with the virus, either from home or school, or someone who has tested positive with the virus themselves. In the month of that's for the month of November so far. These teachers have been required to remain at home in quarantine or in isolation. Mrs. Kudwell will next share the importance of elementary consistency and routines.
One of the additional concerns that we have regarding the currently planned calendar is the disruption to the instructional mode for students. The current plan is going to require students to transition between in-person and remote instruction multiple times over the course of the next few months. Even in a typical school year, next slide please, Chester. Even in a typical school year, anytime there's a change in a learning environment, teachers are reteaching routines and working on reinforcing those routines. Our elementary teachers often plan additional time following a break of any length to reteach routines and procedures so students can feel safe and successful in their classrooms. Teaching and reteaching routines is taking longer this year as student learning environments, both in-person and remote, are functioning differently than they have in previous years. Consistency and predictability are critical for our elementary students, and the currently planned schedule, with all of its frequent transitions between instructional modes, will not provide students with a consistent and predictable schedule. Next slide, please. In terms of our classrooms that have at least one quarantined student or staff member, last week on any given day, all of our buildings have between 23 and 40% of their elementary classrooms impacted. From the numbers that we gather today, almost half of our elementary classrooms have someone who is quarantined within them. So this is not leveling off. This is not getting better in our community. It's continuing to impact instruction. Next slide, please. Even in schools without positive COVID-19 cases, there are still classrooms of students who have to quarantine due to close contact with COVID positive individuals, either in their home or the community. Students who are quarantined, whose classrooms are not remote, are receiving direct instruction from their teachers, but only during the Wednesday remote model. Teachers are providing assignments throughout the rest of the week, but this is still presenting a significant interruption in instruction for those impacted students over the extended period. And as of today, 48% again of our classrooms have someone who is quarantined due to exposure to COVID. This is impacting our staffing as well too. So this is the number of elementary staff positions that have been unfilled by the substitute pool to date. It is still a strain on our system when we have these community numbers. The community numbers are impacting our ability to staff our classrooms and our schools appropriately. These include classroom teachers, support and intervention services, paras, lunchroom supervisors, and et cetera. And even as you noticed the last few days there, while we have closed our secondary buildings for in-person and attempted to reallocate staff as best we can, it did not solve the issues that we had existing at the elementary level. So some positions, such as guest teachers, may still be needed if we have secondary staff who are unable to teach due to health concerns or unable to teach due to their families' health concerns. So Some of those positions could be reallocated, but as you see from these numbers, that did not solve the issues that we are running into.
The next slide here, again, you've seen this calendar, which again represents what the board approved on November 16th for the elementary level. Chester, the next slide, please. By comparison, this proposed calendar ensures that we are not in person during the incubation period from Thanksgiving. It provides consistent instructional delivery for all students, even those impacted by quarantine, and helps to alleviate the staffing strain as community cases continue to impact our district. And again, I'll leave it at that. Next slide, please, Chester. The final slide, again, is the same information on both sides, just written out. The recommendation is to revise the mode of instruction at the elementary level, JK through 5, to be remote an additional 2 weeks, December 7th through the 18th. And again, mirroring the secondary program, that we would continue remote through January 8th with a possible return on or after the 11th, January 11th, 2021. And programs that serve students with additional needs will be prioritized for an early return to in-person instruction, as we have done previously. And again, on the far right is just highlighting ultimately the change in which we are recommending tonight, impacting those 2 months, or those 2 weeks, I'm sorry, of remote learning, which represents 8 days of in-person instruction. And with that, I'll open up to the board for discussion or questions. And the cabinet members will be on the ready as well to assist with answers.
Okay, do we have a motion so that we can start discussion?
To start the discussion, I'll move to approve the recommendation as presented this evening.
I will second.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy, supported by Mr. Abate to approve the recommendation as presented. With that, questions, comments?
I have a couple questions, and this is probably just because I'm new, so I apologize if you already know this. But can you speak to what's something that would cause, like, would trigger a school to shut down?
Thank you. What we've looked at in the cases that we have had most recently, it's been a combination of things. In one case, it was simply operational. While we had one student case, the number of staff who were impacted posed a significant challenge to being able to maintain that building for the full 14-day period. And so we made the decision to move the building to remote. In another, it was a high combination of number of staff in quarantine, as well as students in quarantine, and a high number of student absences reported as COVID related. And that's probably the case in 2 of our building closures.
So can you describe what happens when a school that's open, like the teacher's sick and there isn't a sub? Like, what do they actually do? Who goes into the classroom?
I'm not sure I understand exactly the question, other than it can be going into the classroom. If the class is still in person, it may be a guest teacher. As you saw by the slide, if a guest teacher is not available, it will be another teacher, administrator, or staff member who is otherwise unassigned and leaving their current responsibilities in order to fill in. Oftentimes at the elementary level, it would take a number of individuals throughout the course of a day with the students in person to fill in. Ms. Kudwa or Ms. Ingblom, do you want to add to that response at all?
So that may be a mix, as Mr. Archibald shared, of different staff members going in throughout chunks of the day to cover that classroom. We've had building principals covering classrooms. We've had support staff covering classrooms. But it does mean then that whatever other services they would be providing during that time are not able to be covered. So it does impact us when we can't move enough people in to cover classrooms. So this week, at the end of last week and the beginning of this week, we've had our secondary buildings closed, but that has not solved our issue of having enough staff coverage at the elementary level.
And when you say support staff, I think that phrase gets misunderstood or misused by lay people a lot. So are you saying like a certified resource room teacher who's also like a special ed certified, or are you talking about like one of the ladies from the front office?
So it might look like someone who's teacher certified would be someone who would try to get in there for the majority of the day. That would be our first piece. So a literacy interventionist, a resource room staff member, but it could be covering for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, somebody who is not teacher certified.
Okay, and that might happen during the reading block of a third grade classroom. Okay. That helps, thank you.
You were muted there, Carrie.
Yeah, sorry. Anyone else? It looks like Mr. Clark is unmuted. So did you have a question or comment?
I just have a comment that last week, the board as a whole put a considerable amount of deliberation, a lot of, I think, very well thought out communication between ourselves and the administration. And I thought we laid out a plan that was doable. The board discussed the fact this wasn't going to be easy, but we hope that our leadership team and our building leaders could rise to the challenge. That appears that that's not the case. I'm extremely frustrated because I think we're hanging these parents and students out again with the prospect that what is best for the student doesn't take precedent. I am not in favor of changing our plan that we voted on last Monday. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Abate?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? I want to make sure I unmuted.
Yes, you're good.
So, Jenny, last week, I want to give you credit again for listening to everything that we said and distilling that down to something that made sense, right? I utmost respect for you and appreciate the contributions you put in to do that. And that was great. A lot of people asked in email and a lot of people talked tonight about what changed over the course of the week. I think that's a very fair question. And I just want to address that from my perspective because I was clearly very conflicted in the last meeting. I said as much, and I did a lot of, I was nervous when we left that meeting, and I wanted to watch and see what happened in the aftermath of our vote. This week was messy for this district, and I think folks they note their case here, a case there. The full impact of that needs to kind of be outlined. We flipped, and administration, you can correct me if I'm wrong on my numbers, but we flipped 4 classes in 3 different buildings remote over the course of the week. This is all after we voted to stay in. That's dozens of kids that are out of in-person setting because of needing to quarantine or because they had to have their class flipped because of a case. We had multiple staff members in multiple buildings that either had to go out for quarantine or came up positive. We had students that were quarantined from buses. Last week, I was really impressed with that ECC, or hopeful that ECC, hadn't been affected. We got a notice tonight that there's a case that they're probably still in the process of contact tracing now. And the reality is that there's no building that's going to avoid this. And so, as much as I really think we had great intentions, the best intentions, trying to find some kind of middle ground compromise for folks, I think in light of all I saw this week anyway, in my opinion, I think we made a mistake in the direction that we took. And, we hired these folks, Mr. Archibald and our administrative staff, to make these recommendations pretty much all of Oakland County is out, except for Novi and ourselves. Spoke with some folks in Novi. Their hybrid is such that they can get their class sizes down lower than ours, which is nice. That's just not the case here. So I think it's time that we follow the recommendation of our administration to keep people safe. I appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
I have
Anybody else?
comments.
Oh, yep, go ahead.
I didn't understand the questions versus comments thing. So I wasn't here last week, but I have gone back and watched the meeting. And last week, after changing the plan that Mr. Archibald presented, and the board like really quickly realized that the question of offering like a single teacher workday hadn't been addressed. Most of you quickly jumped to claim that you wanted to give him and his staff, whatever is needed or everything that's needed. And now he's back and he's talked to the frontline education workers who are tasked with implementing your plan. And he's telling us what he needs. Like, this is it. This is what they need. And it's not popular with some families, but it's what the people who are employed by our district are saying loudly and clearly that they need. So I don't understand how this is even like a question. Last week, many of you said that you knew this would happen back in August, in September, in October, and now it's late November and it's happening. The community spread in our area is out of control. And the people that carry out the board's policies are, again, for the second week in a row, asking and pleading for our support that you've promised to give for months. Our primary obligation, as I understand it as a first day board member, is that we need to ensure that students' needs are identified and met. And our students need to have a safe, functional learning environment that allows them to access the curriculum. Our students need to know that we care about the health and safety of each child and adult in our school system. Our students need us to accept Mr. Archibald's plan and keep our students and staff safer. Our students need us to recognize that just because some groups are louder and more persistent, that doesn't make them right. Our board needs to do the job that many in our community won't. We need to prevent families from knowingly sending kids to school sick, like Ms. Ertel mentioned last week happens. We need to create like a low-key quarantine for some families who are going to gather in large groups in a few days, like Ms. Hanshaw acknowledged is very likely. We need to be the adults who are going to keep our students and staff safer and healthier. Like, this is no fun. No one likes any of this. We all want our children in school. I want my own child in school, and I want your child in school. But more importantly, I want all of our kids, our principals, our students, our teachers, our janitors, the school secretaries, nurses, social workers, like I want them all to come back next year too. So as an educator, I'm going to stand in solidarity with my fellow educators, and I fully support Mr. Archibald's plan as presented.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ertel.
Yes, I am extraordinarily conflicted. I would love for our students to be able to stay in person. I think it's important, it's necessary, and it's needed. But this last week, after receiving multiple emails of suspected positive cases, the need for quarantine, one thing that I did not think about last week was there was an instance where not only a classroom had to go into quarantine, but the student was around close contact, 10 students on a bus. So those 10 students who were in different classrooms also had to quarantine. Because those 10 students were in quarantine, but their specific classroom was not, they did not get instruction except on the remote day, which means 4 of the 5 days of that week, those students did not get instruction due to the fact that they were not in school. They the elementary teachers are not online during in-person instruction, so they cannot access or be in that class, so to speak, during that time. So they miss significant instruction time. So I'm still conflicted in my head. I'm unsure even to this moment which way I want to fully vote tonight, because I think we need to be in person, but I also understand the issues that we have with being in person. I want to let everybody know that, you know, the multiple emails we have gotten from families, from staff, from teachers, even some individual emails we've gotten, you know, direct to us from teachers that we may have had in the past. You know, we read them all. I've read them all. It's really difficult because we literally, I think, are split down the middle in terms of our community. We have a significant amount of staff that want to be in person. They understand the challenge, but we also have a significant amount of staff that would rather be remote so they can give a consistent daily education to their students. It's difficult, and I really hope that whatever decision this board comes to, that everybody understands that what we're trying to do is difficult, and we're trying to make the best decision for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Witt, did you have a comment?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry, you raised your hand for a second. Okay, Mr. Kennedy.
I agree with what Ms. McDowell said, that we're going to make a not popular decision. But I don't think what we are charged to do is a popularity contest. We're not here to be liked or disliked. And whatever decision we make, some folks are going to like it and some folks are not going to like it. But we could debate this ad infinitum. We could hear hundreds of more comments and read hundreds of more emails, which we have. And we have deliberated and considered and reflected on them. And there's the correct thing to say here is this is not a my way or the highway. This is not a I'm right and you're wrong, because it doesn't apply. And I think that's the mindset that we have to get out of. Mr. Scott, in his comment, asked what kind of message we're sending. The message that we're sending, at least that I'm sending, is that I don't think we got it right last week. We tried to compromise, we tried to find a middle ground, and I'm not confident that it worked. And I'm not confident that it will work. I don't think there's a whole lot that we can say will change a lot of our community's mind as to what they want us to do. But in the back of our minds, I think we know what we need to do to keep our kids as safe as we can as a district and as a community. I will echo with what Mr. Ertel said. Students are coming to school sick. Moms, dads are giving them aspirin or acetaminophen before they come in, and their temperature's down, so they're okay for the day. I think the transmissions are happening in our district, and we need to do everything that we can to keep them safe. Again, it's not a popular decision, and it's true. I don't think anybody wants to be in our shoes to make that decision, but it's one that we need to do. Thanks, is all I have.
Okay. Okay, my take on all of this. Since March, the things that we have learned are that the data constantly changes, the direction constantly changes. You can find a piece of data, you can find an expert, you can find another local community to support either side of this argument. And the bottom line is the mission of our district is, I'm going to read it, In support of our community, the mission of Southline Community Schools is to provide the highest quality educational process so that all students can excel as individuals and become productive and contributing members of society. The superintendent and the administrative team who we hired as experts have come to us again saying that they truly feel that the best educational process is to put the kids back in remote. And, you know, we as board members are in charge of giving the superintendent a direction. And our direction was to provide an education and safety for our students and staff. And this is what they're recommending. They are well aware that we all want kids in the buildings as quickly as possible. They know that, they've heard that loud and clear, and I am very confident that they will do their best to bring kids back into the buildings when they feel it's safe. So at this point, I do agree that even though we tried really hard to come up with a really good compromise on Monday, the data shows that the numbers are going in the wrong direction, and our team is telling us that they do not feel it's a good educational process, and I think we need to listen to them. Do we have any additional questions or comments before we take a vote? Mr. Tell?
Yes. One thing that I forgot to ask that I had in my head, the one area about the self-contained special needs, special ed kids. Some of the emails we've gotten from those families, you know, there's children that are nonverbal, there's children that, you know, would have a significant issue with online. If we put the elementary in remote, is there the ability, because we'll have a smaller overall building population, to have those children be able to attend school so that their needs could be met a little bit more easily for the kids and their families?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tell. I'll answer that, and I'll Mrs. Toth or Sue, would you like to go first? Go ahead.
So definitely we want to have our students with special needs from our complex classes back in person as quickly as possible. Now, each particular classroom's unique in its own way. We have some classes that are currently in quarantine themselves. So we have to look at each classroom specifically. We have been working with our county nurses also to give more training to the staff to make sure that we're doing extra distancing and making sure that we're limiting that. But we do need to take a look case by case, classroom by classroom, what that looks like. But definitely, you've heard from our teachers, they would like to have students in person as well.
Yeah, I guess my my question or concern is that can we look at that as its own sort of day by day, week by week decision, as opposed to having them clumped into the general population? You know, if the vote goes to do full remote for the K-5, JK through 5 programs, you know, that 2 weeks before Christmas, you know, if there's the ability to have those students attend, if there's the ability for those students to come in, I don't even know if it's necessarily daily, but if there's a way to get them in a couple times a week just to have that extra support, you know, for those students, if that's something that can definitely be part of the plan for the month of December for the potential remote scenario.
If correct me if I'm wrong, that under what was approved last Wednesday, the self-contained classrooms would have been remote the week after Thanksgiving. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So with that, sticking with that, the recommendation that we would be making tonight would be that programs that serve students with additional needs, so our self-contained classrooms, would be prioritized for early return. So the way we have worded it would allow us that latitude to do something different with those students, very much like we did in the fall. Mrs. Toth, do you want to add anything to that?
That captures it.
All right, thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Bate, please call the roll.
All right. Ms. Zertel.
Of course, you're going to call me first.
Do you need a minute? I will go. I'll move on. Take a minute. I'll move on.
No, I will vote. I'm going to vote yes, but it's conflicted.
Okay. Ms. Sancha.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
I vote yes.
I vote yes as well. Mrs. McDowell.
Yes.
And Mr. Clark.
No.
All right. Motion passes 5-1. All right, next up is our second opportunity for public comments. Again, reminder, we do have a 3-minute limit. And let's see. Okay, first up is Erica Wild. She states, I'm a parent of 2 elementary students at Pearson. I am also an RN of 17 years. I urge you to keep our young kids in person. My first grader is learning to read and has already lost 1/3 of her kindergarten year. And now her first grade year only has 20 days in person. Please, please, please let them get in their in-person education. Janine Owen. In addition to students, I care about the teachers, custodians, office staff, administrators, parapros, etc., who may not fare as well if they contract COVID. Children are resilient and will survive if we shut down temporarily. We need to honor their health, their family's health, and the health of our students who bring home COVID from school. Please do not allow angry, passionate rhetoric from parents to persuade you to ignore science and the responsibility you have to your staff's safety. Evelyn Krieger. Oh, sorry, I missed one. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay, sorry. Evelyn Krieger. I am a teacher and a parent of a student at SLCS. I have been nothing but thrilled with the education my student is getting in his VLP junior kindergarten class. Sure, I was worried at first, but his teachers are incredible and really finding ways to make this work. Education is essential, but parents forget that teachers are not provided with the PPE that medical staff are. If parents want kids to come back in person eventually, they need to keep their kids home now. Heather Conley. This year is hard on everyone. Unfortunately, this also means it is going to be hard on our children as well. Our kids are strong and will recover. Our older generation, however, just might not. Every morning I sit on calls with hospitals in the area who are quickly filling up and stressed. If we cannot control the spread in our community, we put others at risk. Signing up for the hybrid model did not mean we are okay with in-person with numbers this high. Thank you for your time. Maria McKella. Do you have statistics on the percentage of elementary student cases that are due to sibling cases, high school or middle school students that have tested positive? If that is prevalent, spreading among families as opposed to school-related activities, perhaps elementary students with older siblings should be made virtual while other students stay in person. Greg Manello states, I have an 8th grade daughter and she has not had sexual education training yet. Is there a resource online to help if we go virtual? Adam Authier. I suspect that the majority of parents pushing for in-class learning are more concerned about the free childcare our teachers provide than the educational merit of this mode of learning. Health and safety of our kids and teachers should not be second fiddle to inconveniencing parents' childcare plans. Our teachers and kids do not have hazmat PPE like doctors and nurses, and they are forced to trust that parents aren't sending their kids to school sick. Next is Kristen Dufin, and she was planning on calling in. Ms. Dufin? Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Okay, if you do log on, just let me know and I'll let you have your comment. Next is
Hi,
Barb.
can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can. Go right ahead, please.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so I promise I will
keep this as brief as possible. I'm quite emotional, as I know many other parents are. This is not about free childcare. This is not about, you know, what one had said, that just because our group is louder doesn't make us right. That was one of the most disheartening things I could have heard. I fully understand and respect the need to take the most precautions to keep physical safety top of mind. I'm writing it at this point, it's a moot point, but to beg you to please consider the emotional and mental effects being fully remote has on our children. We have 3 boys in Dolson Elementary, 2 in 3rd grade, 1 is in 2nd grade. All 3 of them have always had wonderful relationships with their teachers in the past. Even while 1 has an IEP, he's been able to thrive. That is until March of this year. There are students that teachers have expressed sincere joy having in their class, and I mean that. We've had great relationships. What is normally compared to grumpy old men level of bickering between 3 young brothers close in age has turned into a deeper level of tension, a dull sadness. Since this started, we've witnessed a very slippery slope of negativity and what presents as hopelessness from these 3 sweet boys. One of them has even started saying things like, "Why do I have to be the dumbest kid alive?" Even more concerning, "I wish I wasn't alive," to which we as parents have responded and have given serious action to. Sorry. Since going back to in-person learning, we've seen an improvement because they've been in a classroom environment, even though it's different. It provides a positive structural learning environment. They have conversations with others and can listen to actual instruction. We also work from home full time. This is not about childcare. My job has suffered. I'm on the brink of getting fired because my kids come first. This is not about childcare. This is about giving them the ability to thrive in remote care, in the remote learning. I can't be with them when all of us have 6 calls a day to be on. And in being in leadership, I can't just skip those calls. I feel like our kids' emotional well-being, some of the comments saying that it's about an inconvenience because of childcare and that just because we're louder doesn't make us right, is one of the most insensitive things that I could have heard tonight. Our state government gave the exception to elementary aged kids for a reason. These children need school. They need a positive learning environment that's conducive to growth. And as much as it hurts me to say this as a parent, I'm not able to give that environment to them at home. And like many.
Thank you for your comment, and please take care of your family. Next up is Barb Klock. Based on the stats and data provided in the slideshow and your rationale for going remote in December, how and why are you proposing reopening schools on January 11th when that is well before your 14-day quarantine rationale? This is nuts and doesn't make sense. Your approach and rationale are inconsistent and is very confusing to all. Jonathan Krieger states, I have sympathy for this difficult decision, or how difficult this decision is, and the impact on parents, students to move fully virtual. While there is often an argument about COVID, there really isn't a debate. We know the risks, we know people ignore those risks, and despite efforts to mitigate them, cases are on the rise. I keep hearing the same thing from parents who favor in-person instruction. They want what they want, and blaming teachers for any suggestion that in-person isn't safe. Until cases come down, move virtual. Victor Valuj, did you want to call in? I don't see a comment written. Victor Valuj? Okay, if you join us, just let me know. Michelle Gachinor. I'm a parent of 4 kids in the district, 2 of which are at the elementary level. My youngest is in 2nd grade and on an IEP. He has a speech therapist, a reading recovery teacher, and an OT teacher, in addition to the normal daily required learning. While in face-to-face, he has thrived. However, during virtual learning, it is a struggle. There are daily outbursts of frustration. He is not getting what he needs like he would in the classroom. How will his needs and other kids like him be addressed? Barb Clock. It was mentioned that 10 students who came in contact with someone who tested positive, but their classes were not quarantined. Those 10 students didn't receive instruction, and there are others in a similar situation. That's the fault of the C&I department, who don't have a plan in place to accommodate those situations. Get your act together and advocate for kids. Come on, leadership, you are better than this. Many parents are losing faith in the school district leadership and board. Mr. David Price states, Mr. Clark, how dare you question the admin's ability to rise to the occasion? The board tasked Mr. Archibald with running the district. He presented a plan last week that he and his team created, and the board swept his legs out from under him. Our building principals have worked tirelessly to make in-person learning as good as it could be. I have had personal conversations with Mr. Archibald and my principal, but none with you. Where have you been? Finally, 500 characters is ridiculous. Paula Tamanis. How does this affect ECC? Can they stay in person? Brad Halbertstadt. Question. You're saying special needs children can come back to in-person early. COVID does not discriminate. The rules should not differ. A virus is a virus. Tiffany Lowry states, this is a staffing problem, resolve it. Your mission is to educate, not worry about the community. Fix the remote instruction and you won't see this outcry. Joseph Kiemig. The percentage of community spread you cited for last week is 70 per 10,000 residents. The math is 0.007%. This is clown shoes and ignoring the CDC recommendations. Masks work, right? And you assume our families will not do the right thing over the holidays with no data to support this. Record mental health and suicide attempts among our youth are being ignored to kowtow to the teachers union. Give parents the choice we were promised. Ms. Karen Mikola, are you on the line?
Yeah, I am.
Yes. All right.
Can you
Just
hear
quick
me?
reminder, you only have 3 minutes. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I've called in several times before, and I've written in and listened to all the board meetings since early August. And it really comes down to, how do you rank safety versus education? Is one more important than the other? Are they equal? It's a hard decision to make by anyone, but I just wanted to offer my own words in hopes it provides some insight. This is my last of 18 years with a child in the district, as my son graduates from East this year, and my daughter had graduated 4 years ago, but now sits at home since her college canceled her housing for the year. To the parents out there, I sincerely hope you don't ever have to deal with health issues that you never expected when you brought your child home from the hospital. Personally, my family has had several instances where the risk should have been low, but unfortunately events did occur. She was injured when she was in middle school at Millennium in gym class because of a misplaced ball bag, and has had 2 knee surgeries since then. And she gets to look forward to future knee replacement surgery, probably in her 20s or 30s, because of the damage that was done. You never know when a member of your house will get an unprovoked blood clot, only to find out that you have a genetic factor that 8% of the population has, and most people don't even know. It's one of many genetic factors affecting the blood. And with COVID out there right now, it's a serious risk. You never know when your kid could develop Kawasaki disease, which is a disease that should ring bells in your head if you pay any attention to the news. It is the disease that gets compared to the multi-inflammatory syndrome that children develop as a result of COVID. My child developed that when she was 8 years old, had 3 heart scans over a year to check for developing heart defects. Another child in this community wasn't so lucky when he got it. It affects the vascular system in the same way that the multi-inflammatory system does. All of these are random events that we never expected to have happen. People talk about the risk. They're out there, and we know that when we have kids. But when it really happens to you, it impacts your life. You might have happens, and I guess just look just go forward with an open eye, not necessarily be scared, but be informed. Now imagine going into an environment where we know that there's definitely the possibility of getting sick. Maybe you're still willing to take those risks. I'm just putting it out there. I know you have a tough decision as a board, but there's definitely an answer, a question that needs to be answered, and it is education versus safety. A final note, when we compare ourselves to Novi, we're not Novi. Novi had a huge proportion of their student population go virtual, and I've heard 40% from listening in on their meeting and also talking to a principal in that district. So,
Thank you for your comments. Next is Bala Lakshanan. We have appointed. I'm sorry. We've appointed school administrators to come forward with recommendations based on the latest situation. A good board will make changes based on new information and reverse a decision that was made, if deemed incorrect. There is no ego in admitting a mistake. A lot of people are going to be unhappy going remote, and there will be emotions all over. But safety of our students and teachers are paramount. We cannot ignore science and accept some emotional arguments. Matt Blazak. What is the name of the board member in the red shirt? He comments about who is louder is a complete disgrace, and for her to say she is going to vote because she is standing with her fellow educators is a slap in the face to us as a community. Your vote is for the community. You should be ashamed of how you acted in this public meeting. Mandy Venning. We are fighting for 8 in-person days in December. That was all. We agreed to your extra weeks off after the holidays to allow for a cool-down period after suspected holiday gatherings, and we can't get these 8 days. I don't understand what is going to change between now and January 11th. This district has failed our children. You have all failed our children. Brad Halberstadt states, since I will not be able to accept job bids, I guess I will have plenty of time to not only homeschool, but also petition for lower property taxes since folks don't want to work. Elizabeth Erbiel. Virtual learning has been an absolute nightmare for my child, nothing but crying, yelling, and fighting. He will not be ready to move forward. Please consider making this year not count for the students. Oh, okay. I was just seeing how many we had left. Joanne Whitney. You now need to address the amount of instruction time given per day. Secondary kids get 3 two-hour blocks with their teachers. Elementary kids get sporadic 10 to 30-minute lessons. The Wednesday plan for Bremer is a morning meeting, then a morning lesson, 45-ish minutes. Then students are left for independent work. 5 to 10-year-olds working alone for 6+ hours while teachers have meetings is unacceptable. Teachers are educators first and foremost. Meetings should be minimized and instruction maximized. Tammy Cast states, thank you to Mr. Clark for standing his ground. Let's face it, any parent that can afford private school is actively researching their options for the future. How many students have been pulled out of the school system this year? This will hurt South Lyon in years to come. Talking with family out of state, this system is viewed as a joke. Neighboring states are in school. The state government gave an exception to elementary. We are disregarding that. Bethany Courtney. Mr. Clark is a teacher in an elementary building. It is absolutely heart-shattering to hear that you feel that our school leaders and teachers are not rising to the occasion of in-person learning. I strongly suggest that you come into the building to witness firsthand just how much these teachers, leaders are rising to the occasion. We are rising to the occasion and then some. Please watch us do this. Mike Davis states, this meeting is a mockery. A week ago, you voted differently, and now you're changing with almost no data to support your decisions, other than saying that things got worse this past week. Your own charts showed that only 2 in 10,000 more people tested positive this week than last week in the community. Your job isn't to keep all students from contracting the virus. It is to mitigate risk while providing an education to our kids. Even the governor is getting this right. And our last comment is from Kelly Muston. I'm a parent of 5 students in South Lyon Community Schools, 2 at East, 1 at Millennium, and 2 at Hardy. My 2 at Hardy were part of an exposure on their bus and have been quarantined. They both received packets. These cannot be done independently at their ages. I think many districts do not think about the number of students who would be in the same situation. Perhaps a premier sub can be assigned to a building to work with those kids. And thank you to Bridget for your comments. Oh, sorry, I thought that was the last one, but I just got 2 more. Lindsay Koch. The new board member, Bridget, should be ashamed. Very unfortunate that the board is failing our kids once again. Thanks to Randy Clark, who has and continues to fight for our kids. And the last one does not have a last name, so I will not be reading that. We don't read anonymous names, so anonymous comments. So with that, we will move on to our next item, which is a motion to adjourn. Unless we want board comments. It's not listed on the agenda, but if the board would like to do board comments, we could do that. But I will also entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
I will second.
Moved by Mr. Kennedy, supported by Mr. Abate. Again, any questions or last minute comments? Okay, Mr. Abate, please call the roll.
Mrs. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Tell.
Yes.
I vote yes, Mr. Kennedy,
Yes.
and Mrs. Hanshaw.
I vote yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Night.